The whole strategy the Knicks are deploying is we're going to try to make it as hard as possible for them to get like these swing, off the catch 3-pointers. We're going to try to make them take threes we want them to take, and we're going to live with the variance. They are literally living with the variance of the 3-point shooting. They're experiencing positive variance, and they are maximizing their chances of winning the series given that positive variance.
To the Knicks' credit, to Tom Thibodeau's credit, he's embraced that, and they've gone with that approach, which is the sound approach to beat this Boston Celtics team, and it's worked out for them, and they're up 2-0 in the series. So that's credit to the Knicks. That's credit to the coaching staff for taking this approach. I would have taken the same approach, and in fact, I would double down on that approach such that I would switch even with more regularity. Boston's principles are such that you have an advantage 3, you take it. You don't have an advantage 3 and say, nah, you know what? I'm going to try to get an advantage mid-range shot. Like, they're not going to do that. And if they do that, then they're playing into my hands even more.
These are such positive signs for the Knicks because it shows that Tibbs is seeking answers in ways that I would argue he hasn't really before. And I think that there's a correlation with that sort of open-mindedness and seeking of answers and making the improvements that are going to be necessary for them to win game 3 because they're going to need more offensively, you'd imagine.
They have to continue to be aggressive. They have to continue to seek different answers to the Boston Celtics defense. I think game 3 is everything. I think if the Knicks go up 3-0, the series is over and the Knicks will advance to the Eastern Conference Finals, and that is all but a guarantee. I do think the team that wins game 3 wins this series. This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host, XJ. As always, I'm joined by my brilliant co-host, Geoff. If you are listening to us, watching us right now, you will not want to miss this episode. We have a lot to discuss. The Knicks are about to take their home court with a 2-0 lead in the Eastern Conference semifinals. What does this mean for the Knicks? What are their chances of winning this series? What do they need to do to close out and win this series, win 2 more games of the next 5? Geoff, what would you have said if I told you on this podcast ahead of the Knicks-Celtics matchup that the Knicks would be going home to an insane Madison Square Garden up 2-0? What would you have thought if I told you that's how things were going to go?
I would assume that like Jason Tatum got hurt or something. Like honestly, that would be my assumption, or Derek White. This is crazy. There's 2 of the like. XJ gives me props for it all the time. I'm pretty good with like remembering playoffs, NBA related stuff when it comes to the playoffs, and I have a pretty
modesty,
good memory for that.
The best.
I have a
Geoff.
pretty good memory for that stuff. Yeah. I don't remember too many back-to-back games exactly like this. Like obviously the 20-point comebacks are completely unprecedented. I think they're literally the first team in NBA history to have back-to-back 20-point comebacks. I think I saw that floating around today. But the combination of the comebacks and just the style of how it is, like both games, actually, it really felt like the Celtics were up 20 and they could have been up more. It was like the Celtics are kind of limping to 20-point leads. And then it's like, okay, if the Knicks are down 20 against the Celtics playing like this when it feels like they've left a lot on the table, and then the Knicks just flip a switch. And it's like, okay, yeah, you think the Celtics are playing bad? We're gonna get them to play worse, and we're not gonna give up. We're just gonna keep inching back, and then you get the Knicks in a close game. You get Jalen Brunson in a close game, and look, if you're looking for people to come and be like, oh, they've got that dog in them, their clutch gene, like that's just I'm sorry, that's just not the podcast. This isn't the right podcast for that. But I do believe that Jalen Brunson is one of the best clutch players in the NBA, and not because of some mental edge he has on the NBA. I think that he is one of, if not the most skilled NBA players at getting the requisite high floor buckets required to score in the clutch, in the half court offense, because every team, for whatever reason, in these moments grinds to a halt. So you have, and we're seeing it with Boston in real time. When Boston and the Knicks both grind to a halt and go to these boring vanilla half court sets where not a lot happens, Boston's starting from here and they're going down here. The Knicks aren't changing that much. They're just running offense the way they normally do. They're going to give the ball to Jalen Brunson and they're going to ask him to create a bucket. That's the most normal thing in the world to him. So that is why I think he's the best clutch player, because he's the one who's playing the most like he always does. Whereas Jason Tatum is doing something entirely different from what he does the rest of the game. In fact, the best play he's made in the clutch so far this series is when they finally went back to how they usually play, gave him a high screen early in the shot clock, and he got to just get downhill and go to the basket. He wasn't waiting around. He wasn't having to beat anyone in isolation just like late in the shot clock. This was an opportune time for him to get into the paint, and they took advantage of it. But in a vacuum, if you play the Knicks in a close game and you turn it into a one-on-one fest, Jalen Brunson's going to win that more often than not. That is like the one situation I am most certain that the Knicks have an edge over probably any team in the NBA, with the exception of maybe OKC, because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is an excellent one-on-one player himself, and then they have a better defense that can make it more difficult on Brunson in those situations. But aside from OKC, I think Jalen Brunson's going to win in that exact scenario more often than not. And I think the Knicks were just like, if we can just get to that moment, we have an edge. And that's sort of my long, rambly summary of those first two games. Is it really felt like for three quarters, the Knicks were out of it against a team that wasn't fully playing to its potential, but the Knicks were like, we have a chance here. And if we just get within striking range and play this team in the clutch, we can beat this team in the clutch.
Yeah, that's such great analysis. I love that, because I agree with you largely across the board of what you said. The one thing I think that I would add into what you described was that I do think part of why Jalen Brunson is such a quote unquote clutch player, I do think he has somewhat of a mental edge just based on the factors that you described. He's just playing the way he plays like that. And that does, in my opinion, probably convert to a mental edge. Like there's no discomfort. There's no like, oh, okay, how do I do this? There's no thinking through the game. There's just like, hey, go do what you always do. And go do the thing that you're most comfortable doing. Like if anyone asks anyone like to do the thing they're most comfortable doing, they are going to be confident in that situation. And so I do think that does confer a mental edge on Jalen Brunson's behalf, just being super confident, doing what he wants and playing the way he really wants to play. In fact, I would imagine Jalen Brunson loves these clutch situations because he's like, finally, I don't have to worry about passing it. I don't have to worry about making the simple passes to a pick and pop with Karl-Anthony Towns. I don't have to worry about reading defenses in this way. All I have to do is just go get buckets. That's what I love to do. And that's what I do best. And so I do think that for those reasons that you described, that comfortability factor, the Knicks do have an advantage in these clutch situations. I think the thing about it to me is like, we've talked about this all season. We've talked about how the Knicks have a championship level roster. We've talked about the talent that they have on their team and how if they are maximized, they can potentially win a title this season. This is something we've talked about going back to the beginning of the season and have repeated over and over in spite of being 0-10 against the top teams during the regular season and everything that's come out around that. I think this team is still not being maximized, to be honest with you. And I think they're moving in that direction, the way that they're being coached. I think, you've mentioned how good a job Tibbs has done. I'm a little bit lower on the job that Tibbs has done than you are, I think. But we're both in lockstep that he's been considerably better than he had been most of the regular season and in the playoffs thus far. And I think they're trending in the right direction with their switching, with kind of how they're playing, especially later in games. Something that I think they're doing extremely well that I don't know how much has been talked about is they go on runs where they are scoring enough to give themselves a chance when they go into the next quarter. And that's a huge factor again, we're talking about confidence and things like that. That's a huge confidence factor to say we're right there. We're still within this. We're still in this game. The Celtics have maybe outplayed us on a shot quality perspective, but we're getting into the fourth quarter. And that's when we thrive because of the reasons that you mentioned, Geoff. The Celtics are going to slow things down. They don't play as well in an environment where they're just getting one shot and kind of slowing down even more than they would like to. And maybe they have a little bit of identity crisis. And I think we should talk about this just a little bit because I think it's an interesting conversation. But I think for the reasons that you said about how well teams play, or how easier it is for teams to play when they're playing the way that they're used to playing. I think it's really difficult for the Celtics to go away from what makes them good and the way that they play and their style of play, which is create advantages through mismatches, try to get shots at the rim. If those shots aren't there as a result of double teams, etc., kick out for open threes. Or if you have those mismatches where you can just get to nice rhythm step back threes or off the dribble threes and take those. I think that's the way they're comfortable playing. And I think it's tough for them to deviate from that. So let's say they are up by 20 points, and you've made this point several times where they're up by 20 points and it's like, maybe you should start lowering variance. Maybe you should start taking more, short mid-range shots, or maybe you should really focus on getting closer to the rim as opposed to taking 3-point shots that have a high variance and maybe a wider kind of standard deviation from what kind of score you could have at the end of taking those threes. I think that just won't work for them. I think they have to play their style. And if the team comes back as a result because the variance wasn't in their favor, then they just lose that game, and you just accept that, right? Like, to me, it's sort of like playing prevent offense or prevent defense in football. If you're like trying to change how you play too much, such that you're just playing a different team style. And so I think Boston is, I won't say they tried to do that, but I don't know that they've been playing consistently their kind of basketball, especially when these runs happen. And I think they're dealing with an identity crisis. And if they're not able to get things together in game 3 and they lose game 3, obviously they're done. They're not going to win the series if they go down 3-0. It makes game 3 the biggest factor to me. And the biggest factor of game 3 is going to be, to me, the Madison Square Garden crowd. So I'm curious what you think about that. And then we can definitely talk about kind of previewing game 3 specifically.
I think I mostly agree with you about specifically the Celtics. I wouldn't want them to do anything drastically different. I wouldn't want them to like hunt mid-range shots in a way that they're uncomfortable with. I do think that even for them, there is a middle ground though between their absolute normal style, which is just ends up, in my opinion, with the way the Knicks are defending right now, in a flurry of threes, and like what we've been seeing. I think there is some sort of middle ground. My case about variance reducers in a vacuum is basically the short Cliff Notes version. I think NBA teams have made the step of understanding the value of points per possession. And I think that they have drilled it into the coaches and the players' heads of like which shots have the best value. And so they have such a deep understanding of shot value right now but there isn't that same understanding of WinEV, of effective value, like percentage of winning the game. And I do think that there are times for most teams where they are it's been so ingrained in them that certain shots have positive value and certain shots have negative value that they almost unnecessarily hunt those shots. So I'm talking like an exaggerated example the other way would be like a team with Chris Paul on it that's like, oh, I can't shoot these mid-range shots because I'd rather just like force an end to shot clock 3 because technically a 3 is better than a 2. And I see that a lot in NBA games is teams shooting 3s early in the shot clock when, in my opinion, there are variance reducers where they have the capacity to get shots that maybe are slightly lower points per possession, but can actually raise their percentage chances of winning the game, because in these outcomes, like literally the only outcome where they lose the game is if they stop scoring. And
yeah,
again, to your point, maybe the Celtics actually would be more likely to have one of these scoreless streaks if they stop shooting 3s and start shooting mid-range shots, because those are so foreign to them. That's possible. Yeah. I'm totally open to that. But in a complete vacuum, I don't believe that's true. I don't believe it's true that for every team, they would be less likely to score if they shot fewer 3s and they shot more shots at the rim or inside the arc. And I think that the pursuit of maximizing ShotEV has somewhat come at the expense of WinEV in certain extreme circumstances.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I think to me that becomes your case becomes most relevant in like the last 5 minutes of a game or something like that. It was somewhere around that time frame. It's hard to say exactly what the threshold point is, like what the lead is, what the time is, but it's something like much closer to the end of the game to me. I would never, almost in any circumstance, maybe unless they're up like 40 or something, like would think that that would come into play like in the third quarter to me for any team. And just because you mentioned threes and you mentioned shot EV or expected value of the shots that a team is taking, and to me those are, first of all, those are two different things. So there's shooting threes and there's getting the highest quality shot you can, the shot that has the highest expected point value of the shot, right? Sometimes that is a three and sometimes it's not a three. And so to me, a team like Boston, the reason why they are as good as they have been is because they prioritize getting the highest expected value shot that they can on every possession. And they typically do. I think they're the best shot quality team in the league for the past 2 seasons. And to me, if you're always getting the highest expected value shot, one, you are probably getting that shot because you're taking what you're forcing the defense to give you. So it's interesting. It's like there's taking what the defense is giving you, and there's taking what you're forcing the defense to give you. And I think that that's what they're doing. And for that reason, I think Boston in particular, to your point, is, especially because that's just how they play, it would be worse for them to try to deviate too much. But also, I think for any team, if they're getting the highest expected value shot, then I think they should keep doing that. Like really, otherwise, not only are they not getting the highest expected value shot, but they're also playing into the hands of the defense, who the reason why their shot that they're getting is such a high expected value is because defenses have to give up something. They have to give up something. Sometimes they have to give up threes. Sometimes they have to give up mid-range shots. They never want to give up shots at the rim. So there's always going to be a punishment for stopping that from happening. And if they have to give up something, they're going to want to give up the least high value shot that they can. And in my opinion, if you're saying, no, we're going to like scoff at this highest value shot that we can get and force a lower value shot, even if it's a higher percentage shot, I think that that's probably not going to work out for the most part with enough time left. And I think the third quarter is like a no-go for me at that point. So that's kind of my perspective.
I wouldn't want them to like do anything different in the third quarter.
Yeah.
I agree with you that there is a threshold, and maybe we disagree on the threshold, what the lead is, what the time remaining in the game is. Mm-hmm. But I am like extremely, extremely confident, and I'm extremely confident that the math would back it up too, that the threshold does exist where sacrificing points per possession for a higher percent chance at scoring points will raise your win.
100%. 100%. There's a threshold that exists where that is the case. We fully agree on that. That 100% true. Like, I think that is undoubtedly true. It's just what that threshold is, I think, is the question.
Yeah.
So let's shift over to Game 3, because this is the big event to me. And we talked about this a little bit. The team that wins Game 3, and maybe this feels crazy from a Knicks fan perspective, I do think the team that wins Game 3 wins this series, including if it is I almost call them the Red Sox, including the Boston Celtics. I think Game 3 is everything. I think if the Knicks go up 3-0, the series is over, and the Knicks will advance to the Eastern Conference Finals, and that is all but a guarantee. If they go up 2-1, on the other hand, I think Boston has momentum. They're still favorited in terms of the betting odds to win the series, even down 2-0, losing 2 games on the road. They've won both games on shot quality, so they've had a 14-point disparity in terms of getting better quality shots, higher expected value shots, like Geoff and I were just talking about, in both games, by 14 points in both games. So, from a technical sense, you could say that they've outplayed the Knicks in those 2 games. I don't think that's saying something bad about the Knicks, because I think that the way that they would be expected to win in a series that they're 8-1 underdogs or whatever it was that they were to start the series, you do need some shot variance. And to their credit, they've really sunk into that by playing more switching defense and like allowing the Celtics to get to those kinds of shots. And, it's worked out for them. The Celtics have missed 75 threes over the last 2 games. So I do think that the Knicks are having an approximation of the appropriate strategy. So I don't think that's a slight to the Knicks saying that.
It would be crazy, XJ, to like listen to us pre-series and we don't have empty memories. Our memory's not gone. Everybody remembers the conversations that were happening before the Boston series. It's not like there were many people, if any people, who were like, we're going to outplay this team. It was like, let's hope the Knicks play well and let's, hope Boston doesn't make its threes. That was the Cliff Notes version of the conversation. XJ and I took it a step further, and XJ is the one who presented this theory on the Game 1 live stream. There was an opportunity here for the Knicks to embrace variance, and if the Celtics are hitting their threes at an above average rate, the Knicks weren't going to beat them. That's nobody can beat the Celtics if they're hitting their threes. So if you can accept that pre-series, it would be crazy to turn around 2 games later and be like, oh, actually, like the 3-point variance has nothing to do with it. Like the whole strategy the Knicks are deploying is, we're going to try to make it as hard as possible for them to get like these swing off the catch 3-pointers. We're going to try to make them take threes we want them to take, and we're going to live with the variance. They are literally living with the variance of the 3-point shooting. They're experiencing positive variance, and they are maximizing their chances of winning the series given that positive variance. But like the positive variance itself shouldn't be a bogeyman or whatever. Like it should just be, we should be able to talk about it without being haters or whatever. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I do understand it from like a fan perspective. You want to feel like, well, we win this series because we're the quote unquote better team. And I don't think that it means that you're not the better team if you don't get as high a shot quality. Like the Knicks are doing things to win these games. They're closing games really well. They're going forward with a sound strategy. What we talked about actually on our pregame live stream for Game 2 is that it is possible in a weird way that both the Celtics and the Knicks' best strategies moving forward is the same. And you would think that, well, you can't both have both of your favorite strategies can't be the same, because that would mean that, one has an advantage over the other. But I think that because the Knicks are reliant on this variance that they've benefited from, which is great for them, and that's the way they're going to win. Like Geoff just said, if the Celtics are hitting all their shots, who's beating them? There's nobody beating them. I mean, including, and I've said this before, including OKC, including Cleveland, Indiana, whoever, it doesn't matter. They're going to win because you can't shoot 63s in a game and hit half of them and another team is going to outscore you. Like that's just not going to happen, because not only are you making those threes, the opponent is starting their offense in half court sets. They're taking the ball out of the basket and inbounding it in order to start their possessions. There's less opportunities for the opponent to run in transition. There's just not going to be enough possessions to outscore them in that paradigm. So they have to miss threes in order for the opponent to win. That is how a team is going to win and beat them. And to the Knicks' credit, to Tom Thibodeau's credit, he's embraced that, and they've gone with that approach, which is the sound approach to beat this Boston Celtics team. And it's worked out for them, and they're up 2-0 in the series. So I don't think there's a problem with that on either end. I think that's credit to the Knicks. That's credit to the coaching staff for taking this approach. I would have taken the same approach. And in fact, I would double down on that approach such that I would switch even with more regularity to force them into taking, like, look, you have an advantage 3. Tatum has an advantage 3. Jalen Brown has an advantage 3. And Boston's principles are such that you have an advantage 3, you take it. You don't have an advantage 3 and say, nah, you know what? I'm going to try to get an advantage mid-range shot. Like, they're not going to do that. And if they do that, then they're playing into my hands even more. So to me, you give them those quote unquote advantage 3s as long as they're not, like Geoff said, the super advantage 3s where it's swing. And now Derek White's wide open in the corner, even though he missed a wide open corner 3 in Game 2. You won't live doing that too long. And so I just think that the Knicks are having the right strategy. And do you think, Geoff, for Game 3, again, like I said, I think this is the game that makes the series. It makes or breaks. Whoever wins Game 3 wins the series, and that's what I'm sticking to. Do you think for that game the Knicks should change anything about their approach? Should make any adjustments? Should just keep doing what they've been doing and staying tight in games, pushing, on these runs to end quarters and waiting for games to get tight late and have it be situations where the Knicks are more comfortable with those circumstances than the Celtics are?
I think that there are ways for them to not get down 20 in the first 3 quarters, but I think it has more to do with the offensive side of the ball than the defensive side of the ball. I think defensively, look, they can to your point, they can switch a little bit more. They can improve within the scheme and the strategy that they're deploying, but I do think that this is their best chance of winning the series, is just disallowing Boston from getting in the paint, getting comfortable inside the arc, and hoping that they don't miss that many threes. And it's funny because as you were talking, I was thinking like, yeah, we sort of do have a bias here because kind of for the first time all season, we went into a game or a series or a week and we were like, man, the Knicks should start doing this. And then Tibbs did it. and we get to finally we get to be like, Tibbs, good job. You did it. You did what you did, like what we were talking about. And now everybody's like, nah, that's actually not a big deal. Like that's not, it's like, God damn it, man. Let's have this one. Just let us have this. And it's like, I'm sorry, like again, like there's so much good Knicks content, so much good like rah-rah Knicks content. I hope everyone has their own perspectives. But in my opinion, like you just run down this basketball reference page. Jalen Brown, 18%. Derek White, 29.6%. Jason Tatum, 25%. Drew Holiday, 22%. Pritchard, 35%. Al Horford, 10%. Like, I'm sorry, like, if you are unable to both be like, man, the Knicks are doing a really good job. Their strategy is so sound, and their wing defenders are so sharp. They're getting back to the perimeter. They are contesting. They're doing a brilliant job. If you're not able to say that and be like, yeah, the Knicks won 2 games by 4 points, but those 3-point shooting percentages, maybe there's a little shot luck in their favor. If you're not able to say that, I'm sorry. Like I don't want to say this isn't the podcast for you, but like I don't know. Like this might I think we should be able to say both things.
Because that's extreme. That's extreme, Geoff. I agree. I agree with you. I do think it's like, I do think if you're not able to acknowledge that, you are probably looking for just like a pure, like kind of pom-pom kind of approach to analysis. And that's definitely not what we're going to do here. I think that all of what we've said, is totally not mutually exclusive. The Knicks could be doing the right thing, could be playing well defensively, could improve offensively, because I agree with you. And also be benefiting from shot variance and shot luck, which I think all of that is happening. And I think it's good news for the Knicks because that is how they win this series. And so we could argue about like to what extent and, to what extent is the tracking data accurate? How open are these shots? How difficult are these shots? Like we could deliberate about some of those details. But at the same time, I think in principle, what we're saying is what's happening here. And would love to hear from our viewers, our audience, especially if you've made it to this point in the podcast and you're listening to this. If you think we're off about something, or if you think we're not considering something, I would love to hear it. And you could drop a comment, and we engage with every single comment as we do on every single video. So we would love to talk about it, and I'll be open to it. And I would even I'd want to know if I or we are missing something. So please engage in that way. But that being said, does it make Knicks fans or Knicks, analysts like feel bad or like somehow like inferior that if there is a benefit from shot quality? Because I don't benefit from shot variance or shot luck, because I don't feel that way at all. I don't feel like if you advance and go to the Eastern Conference Finals and play an Indiana Pacers team who, let's say it's the Pacers or even if it's the Cavs, a team that you should actually beat, like without having to benefit from shot luck. If that's the case, then that's great. That's how teams sometimes advance. The Oklahoma City Thunder lost to the Dallas Mavericks. I don't think the Dallas Mavericks were the better team. I think they won because Oklahoma City was missing shots that they normally make, and that was the way that Dallas was going to advance, and they did it. They weren't, we feel bad for OKC because they missed shots. No, that's how you have to beat a team who is as good as some of these teams, and I think it's the correct approach. And so, like, I don't think anyone should feel bad about it or feel inferior for those reasons.
Yeah, definitely not. Like, you think anybody's going to remember if the Knicks win a championship? Oh, asterisks, they got some shot luck in the second round. Like, no, fuck that, dude.
It's basketball.
Give me a break. This shit happens all the time. If this didn't happen, the best teams would win every single year. That's why it's nice that there is a little bit of variance each year, and that the Mavericks example is such a perfect example. The Heat from the year before. What has Caleb Martin done from three since that Boston series where he shot 70%? But I'm sure Boston fans remember that as the series they got Caleb Martin to death. But it wasn't like the Heat were deploying some like. It's not like that was a true reflection in that moment. It was just they got a little bit of luck and they took advantage of it, and so that's okay. And that's okay. And you know what else is good news for the Knicks as far as the offense goes? There is a ton of meat on the bone for them too.
Yep.
And it's not shot luck related. It's execution related. It's process related. And they can get more from especially Mikal Bridges in the first three quarters, who was excellent. Mikal Bridges is kind of like the poster of this series. Because I actually texted you early in game 4, and I was like, dude, Deuce has been awesome again, and Mikal's invisible. Like, is Mikal going to play 50 minutes again? And then Mikal had the quarter of his life by
like a historic heater for him. Yeah, unbelievable.
He carried the Knicks offense when both Brunson and Towns were sitting. He defended wonderfully again. And then another credit to Tibbs, which I thought was a brilliant decision. Brunson was not super good in this game too. Not super good at all. I think his defense held up pretty well again, but he was not making shots. He wasn't really getting the foul calls that he usually gets. And Tibbs puts Brunson back in, as he should. But for arguably the first time all season with the team healthy, they actually diversified their offensive look and went to different people. And not like by accident, they actively did it. They had Jalen Brunson dribble up the court and find Mikal Bridges off of one of those dummy off-ball actions, and he ran the offense. And it worked out for them. You know what else Tom Thibodeau did down the stretch? He put Mitchell Robinson in for OG Anunoby. Would I have had him in for Josh Hart maybe instead of OG Anunoby, even though Josh Hart was amazing again in this game too? Probably, because OG is pretty important to the team. But whatever. I still think it was a really cool thing for him to try in that moment and to try and throw a different look at Boston. These are such positive signs for the Knicks because it shows that Tibbs is seeking answers in ways that I would argue he hasn't really before. And I think that there's a correlation with that sort of open-mindedness and seeking of answers and making the improvements that are going to be necessary for them to win game 3 because they're going to need more offensively, you'd imagine. Again, actually I said it before the series, if Boston shoots bad, they can lose to anybody. So yes, they won't need these the Knicks won't need this big offensive leap if Boston continues to shoot like they have the first 2 games. And if the Knicks continue to play defense in a way that maybe puts them in positions where they're more likely to shoot this way in game 3. But if there is some positive regression for Boston to the mean from a 3-point shooting standpoint, I do think the Knicks are going to need some more offensively, and I think it's right there for them.
Yep, I love that. I think that's all totally on point. You made such great calls about things that Tibbs did that I think were very valuable towards winning the game. And also your point about the room for improvement for their offense. Absolutely. I think the Celtics has played really great defense, to be honest with you. And I think that that's a big factor in what we're seeing, but not to the extent that we're seeing some of these numbers from the Knicks. I'm just going to talk about some of their offensive numbers from that game. 96.8 points per 100 possessions, which is 6th percentile, one of their worst offensive performances just on a points per possession basis on the entire season. And in fact, on Clean the Glass is their worst offensive performance of the season, just on a scoring effectiveness basis, which is incredible to say. They won a game that was their worst offensive performance of the season on an effectiveness basis. 49.4% effective field goal percentage, 28th percentile, 17.0% turnover percentage, 17th percentile. So the turnovers were not good for them either. 20.8% offensive rebound percentage, 13th percentile. Didn't get second chances. 9.5% free throw rate, 5th percentile. They were terrible across the board in every one of the 4 factors of team efficiency and effectiveness offensively, and won that game. That is, man, that bodes well for them, because again, they're just not going to play that badly offensively again, in my opinion, in the series. Going back home, there's almost a 0% chance that they follow that up by being worse somehow. So I think that bodes really well for them. And even if Boston does make a few more shots, which I think I would expect them to, I think the Knicks could withstand that with some offensive improvements like what you were just describing, Geoff. So any last thoughts before we get out of here? We wanted to keep this one short.
Yeah, I think that the Knicks did a really smart thing at the start of game 2, even though, again, it kind of got away from them a bit in the third quarter. I love that they looked for Towns early, and they looked for Towns specifically inside the arc. I hope that keeps evolving. Of course, I hope that he starts to shoot more threes too, because he's such a good three-point shooter. But it almost seems like Boston knows that Brunson isn't gonna spam them to death with these pull-up threes, because they don't seem as concerned about that as they do with Towns popping open.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel like Boston's going to let Towns. It feels like it'd be a pretty big mistake if Towns got an open three. And it seems like that's the one thing they're trying to take away. But I thought that in game 2, more than in game 1, the Knicks did a good job of finding ways for him to be involved. And I think that theoretically, him continuing to dominate the way he did, I mean, he made Al Horford look old in that first half. He was going at him and he, after the Celtics had built that lead, he was a big part. Him dominating Al Horford was a big part of the Knicks staying alive. And I think that theoretically, Towns being sort of unstoppable on the low block and inside the arc, creating these 2-pointers, the Celtics are going to have that roamer start to be more aggressive. And I think that'll open things up for the Knicks on the perimeter in a way that will help their team offense. And I think that's something they should lean into more and more, even just as a different look from the normal Brunson starts the offense from the perimeter. I think that's definitely something that can help the Knicks overall.
Yeah, for sure. And especially because Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't have to get all the way to the rim in order to score from the post. I think he can score out of the short mid range. He can score out of, just outside of the restricted area. So I do think that allows him to be able to still operate when Mitchell Robinson is on the court, when Josh Hart is on the court. He can still create those advantages in those situations. I don't like Karl-Anthony Towns being, over his last 3 games, being 0 for 1 from 3. That's not going to really cut it to me. So I understand like what you're saying. Boston is trying to take away his 3-point shot. And we talk about variance, and we talk about Boston losing, some of these games, a lot of it having to do with variance. I think that you can play a little scared. And if you want to try to say, we're going to just try to get high percentage shots in the paint, that can not work in your favor as well. There's extreme ends of both spectrums. And I think if Towns forced a little bit more from the perimeter, I think that would have a domino effect of advantages for the Knicks as well. So I do not want to see him take, again, one 3-point shot for the 4th game in a row, going back to the end of the Pistons series. So hopefully he can increase his 3-point volume a little bit. Even if it's feels like forcing shots. But I'll just say, from the Knicks perspective, I don't think they can play kind of conservatively. I don't think they can play okay, we just got to try to hold on and try to win this game any way we can, just hold on. I think they have to continue to be aggressive. They have to continue to seek different answers to the Boston Celtics defense, to the problems that their defense is facing with them. And I think they have to continue to be aggressive and try to go out and win this game, and not sit on their laurels and say, man, if we can just sit tight, we can steal a home game. And no, I think they have to continue to be aggressive and come up with some adjustments offensively and keep doing what they're doing defensively. And I think they can definitely win this series and advance to the Eastern Conference Finals against all odds. So, yeah, any last words, Geoff, before we get out of here?
No, just see y'all next week. Thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you guys for listening. We will see you next time. Until then, for Geoff, I'm XJ, and this has been High Hand Theory.